I'd like to welcome everyone to the last regular council meeting for the Township of Puslinch on Wednesday, December 19th, 2018. I would like to call disclosure of pecuniary interest and general interest thereof. Seeing none, we will move on to the closed items. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis, that council receive a confidential verbal report from Peter Pickfield, Garrett Pickfield LLP regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, with respect to the matter before the OMB, University of Guelph, Dufferin Aggregate Zoning Bylaw Appeal. B, confidential verbal report from Tom Halinski, Aird and Barrellis, LLP, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. C, confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO clerk, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, with respect to the Director of Public Works and Parks. D, confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO clerk, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local boards, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to OMERS, and that staff proceeds as directed for all four of the above listed items. All in favor? Carried. Okay. So, 2. Moved by Councillor Sapoulis, seconded by Councillor Goya, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. A, council meeting December 5th, 2018. B, closed council meeting December 5th, 2018. Any questions or comments? No? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Okay, so is there any business arising out of the previous minutes? Any questions or comments? Okay. This is the public meeting. So we're going to we had a public meeting. The proposed changes on cannabis retail stores. The public meeting was held on Monday, December 17th. We had approximately 30 people in attendance. I felt that the meeting went very well. We're going to receive a report in January. We had an impromptu survey from the constituents that were at the meeting. As they left, they expressed their opinions on whether to opt in or opt out. So as I believe council, we're looking forward to seeing those results. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Sure. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I think the CAO deserves some compliments regarding the presentation that she put on, that was put on that night. I've read in the paper a lot of municipalities suggest that there was a shortage of information or lack of information, that not enough to make a decision. And while new information is coming, I think we received information in that presentation that that hadn't been reported, that other municipalities received and other residents may not have received. So I thought it was great that our CAO did a little extra digging and brought out some information even that was new that day. So I thought our residents were well informed by that presentation. So thank you very much.
I agree. Excellent job. Yeah, thank you, Karen, for doing such a wonderful presentation. Okay, my watch says 7:04, so I think I will invite the delegate to come down to the table at this point. You're on the schedule for 7:05, so we'll waste a minute or so.
I'll talk a little bit slower.
That works. Maybe not. But, no, I'm just kidding. But, thank you for attending today, and just as you know, after you're completed your presentation, we'll open it up to the council to ask you some questions.
Sounds great.
Big glare. You need
a little bit. No, I think it's all right. It's okay. I should have most of this in my head already. So thanks for taking the time tonight to hear me speak to where we've arrived with the township brand. I'm going to do a sort of a condensed version of what's in this document, just to highlight some of the points that I think are the most important. Basically what we did in this document to show the summary of the brand is we broke it into what we thought were the most necessary elements of what makes this full exercise filled with value. And the very first one, I think is a very important one, is that's why does the township need a brand, or a new brand or a refreshed brand. And what we state is that the goal of this rebrand was to provide the township with an authentic, so true to the township, authentic, elegant, and most importantly, a pragmatic, usable brand that they can apply to township materials and township communication efforts moving forward. Also, because this is a township rebrand and this is a place and developing a brand for a place like Puss Lynch is a much different exercise than developing a brand for a company like Samsung. There's considerations that need to be in place in terms of responsibility. So with this design, there's three things that we were very aware of. The first one is that from a production and a rollout point of view, what you'll see and what you've seen is that this identity is designed to be easily produced, both physically, so it's in one color, which means that will keep the costs low, but also it's a fairly simple brand in terms of the number of elements, which makes it fairly easy to apply, whether you hire a junior designer or whether it's something on the fly happening in the office itself. It's an easy brand to apply correctly. Number two, sorry. So number two was really about the fact that everything in this brand is focused on being a modern approach to branding. So this will work on social media, this will work on print, it'll work in any sort of application that the township would need it to. So in that sense, it has that robust ability that, again, anybody could apply fairly easily. And then the last point is timelessness takes time. And so the reason that we include this one is because when this brand gets rolled out, as much as I love it, as much as we think it's a success, I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit of pushback because it's change. And what we always try to employ is this sense of patience, because over the time as this brand begins to live with the township, people will start to bond with it. And then in 30 years or in 50 years, when another exercise like this happens, you'll receive pushback against this one. So we just like to always caution that up front, that change means something to people, and it's worth considering that timelessness does take time. The reference I always say is the Nike logo is a horrendous little symbol. It's a pointy curve, but we all love it now because of what it's become. So number two, research and discovery. A lot of research and a lot of conversations happened over this process. Part of it began with a great stakeholder committee that I just think is worth acknowledging. They gave some great input. So by the numbers, these are the most important numbers when it comes to the actual responses that I received. So we received more than 500 online responses from residents and non-residents through the course of the project. The brand team ourselves, we attended 2 farmers market events. We were at the Puss Lynch, the Aberfoyle Canada Day fireworks display. And between those, we interacted with just over 250 residents at least. 64% of the residents were able to accurately identify the township crest at the very beginning of this project, which is actually fairly astounding for, I think what's not surprising, how little presence that crest has in the community. To have 64% be able to identify it was pretty remarkable and very telling. And then when given the option between updating the crest to something new and shiny and brand new versus rethinking the idea of the crest, 71% of respondents decided that we should really keep with the crest theme and some idea. And the last note that we thought was very telling is that 1/3 of respondents didn't agree with the authenticity of the township's motto progressing together. So 1/3 is a fairly large number to be in disagreement with the motto. You can skip over some themes. So there were themes that developed, but these will come up in the later. So one thing that we've been doing in regards to ongoing feedback, we've had pusslynchsurvey.ca up for a number of months now with different surveys on it. The most previous one, or the most recent one, was one for the motto, and that's actually currently still live. But the idea there is to have this open forum for the community to provide input as they wished. So. Getting to the actual new Township of Puss Lynch visual identity. So this is the existing identity, and like I said, there was, in all of our research, there was a very clear affection just for either the existence of this crest, the history of the crest, what it means to the community. When we showed options that were brand new, when we showed them a shiny new Township logo, it was loudly loudly disagreed with. There was a clear concern of turning the township into just another area in southern Ontario. And I think there was a very rightly so, the need and the desire to hold on to a lot of what makes Puss Lynch Puss Lynch. So from that, we developed a further crest and iterated on that. So here we have the new crest, which takes a lot of cues from the existing ones with some minor or some major updates. So first, we've introduced the sense of environment and nature. So crowning the top of the crest, we have the leaves acting as almost rays of sunshine, but really giving a nod to the idea of being stewards of the environment. We've replaced the towering castles with classic Puss Lynch architecture. So this is the same architecture that's found on the crest. There's actually a plaque in here somewhere that has this on it. So it becomes sort of the iconic symbol of classic Puss Lynch architecture. In the surveys, this was one that we were curious how this was going to be responded to, but the three symbols of the thistle, the trefoil, and the bull's head, these are symbols of the original, of the settlers of Puss Lynch. And so we were curious if these would be pushed back against, but there was a real fondness for that history. So those have remained. They've been redrawn, but they've been remained. Kept the sense of agriculture with the wheat. This is carried over from the previous crest. Again, redrawn, but still carrying that sense of agricultural history that really drove the township forward. We discussed, so the original crest has a mill rind in the middle that was used to represent industry. Two things happened with that. One, nobody knew what the actual thing was in the original crest. And two, we put out this sort of investigation to see how do we best represent industry in Puss Lynch. And the feedback was as diverse as you could imagine. And so where we ended on this was a sense of potential and opportunity. So where the industry is in Puss Lynch is in this possibility with all the open land, with the convenience of the surrounding areas. There's this real sense of optimism and opportunity, and that's where the rising sun overlooking the sort of iconic field and lake of Puss Lynch came from. So that's the full symbol. And then one of the major sort of pragmatic issues with the existing identity was that it didn't say Puss Lynch anywhere on it. So we looked for a new way to introduce the word Puss Lynch into the mark, and what we discovered was this map from 1860 that was hand drawn in Ontario, is sort of the most historic and true to the history of Puss Lynch in terms of typography that we could find. And so what we did is we took the letters from that map, we redrew them to be usable and contemporary today. We cleaned them up a little bit. And now we have the modern take of, the modern brand is carrying over this really historic typography. So there's a really strong mixture of the old and the new in this symbol now. And what I'm really happy about is that this is a very modern mark. The line work in it is very contemporary. This is something that you could easily see in Europe or in the US, anywhere around the world. It has that style to it, but it carries over the themes and the messaging of Puss Lynch. And what's great is because it's new, it's going to maintain those themes moving forward. So we haven't lost those for the next number of years. So to expand this within the mark, there's a lot of really great potential for a graphic design system. So one, we've introduced a proper color scheme now, pulling on colors from the nature. So we start with this deep warm purple, a deep blue, the iconic red, which a lot of people associate with Puss Lynch because of the existing mark, and then some soft neutrals to back it up. We've introduced a new font face for the brand that has this nice warm modern feel to it. And then in the mark itself are all these little symbols, that we can pull out and use independently of the symbol. So when we're looking to add some style or some interest to a piece, we have this opportunity. And so just to give an example of how this can be applied in the township itself, here's an example of a vinyl application to a window. So with one color, it's a pragmatic and an affordable option, but it has a lot of style to it because of the line work. Letterheads and business cards can be done very, very simply, but still hold the real equity of the brand. PowerPoint templates can be strong and bold. What's fun about this mark itself is you can blow it up and crop it like this and it still maintains its recognition tells a bit of a story. And then you can start to branch out and have a little bit of fun with it. So here we're showing the actual mark cut right in half on one banner using the large typography on another banner. So it creates this great sense of presence and interest while not feeling over the top in any way. Where you want to have some fun, if there is an opportunity to create some pride merchandise, as we call it, you can start to use those symbols in a way that's a little bit more graphic and contemporary. And then when you want to be a little bit less formal, you can introduce the different color schemes to create a bit more of a fun or an exciting approach. And then what's interesting is there's a lot of opportunities to use this brand exercise as an opportunity to reintroduce the community to the brand. So here we have an example of what could be a coloring page that you bring to the schools. And it's an opportunity for the children to learn that they live in the township of Puss Lynch. They can have some information about it, but it brings the brand to life. It engages students who would then bring this home and show their parents. It'd be a great way to grow the brand. So brand attributes and motto. So brand attributes, this is actually something that we try and discover earlier on in the brand exercise, because the brand attributes are essentially the pieces of the brand, or the pieces of the place that we're branding, that really drive the brand forward. And so here are some of the main messaging lines that came through in all of the research. These are the themes that we saw. So the first one, there was this really strong sense of balanced living. So industrious work balanced with boundless fun, traditional small town charm, neighboring Canada's greatest urban amenities, and the bustle of community mixed with quiet independence. So there's this really strong balance that people seem to speak to as to why Puss Lynch is so great. Number 2, rural charm. So from the wide open fields to the intimate farmers markets, the township of Puss Lynch carries a familiar rural charm. Extending beyond the geography, this quality is also found in the genuine hospitality of the community. This one actually came out most in the visitors who attended. When we showed them different logo options or brand options, visitors wanted Puss Lynch to maintain that great sense of that rural charm, because that's what they love to visit and be a part of. Industrious spirit. So from the founding days of the township to today, the people of Puss Lynch have always carried an industrious and humble spirit. The fortitude and grit of this community lives behind a distinctly Canadian modesty. And finally, respect for tradition. So the township of Puss Lynch is a place which honors its past, lives in the moment, and builds for the future. So all of those messaging components and attributes is what really drove the direction of the brand forward. And all of that came from the people. We didn't invent that. We crafted the messages a little bit, but that all came from the people. So the township motto, this is the one element of the brand that we think is still sort of in flux, in that we believe it's really crucial that the council themselves have a lot of input on this, because of setting the course for the township. But with the feedback that we received on progressing together, it seemed like there's sort of a mandate to find what can an alternative model be. So just to give you some input, where the favoritism seems to be right now is in the first one we have listed here, which is where opportunity meets tradition. That seemed to resonate with most people online so far. And then finally, the communications plan. So it's really important that with this brand, we roll it out properly so that it's received well and that it's well maintained. So I won't go into all of the different pieces specifically, but essentially it's really crucial that this is used in a number of ways. First, formally, so everything that comes from the township should show this as the official mark. It's really crucial that, so right now there's sort of 2 identities for Puss Lynch floating around. It's really important that everything that comes from the township has the same unified approach. Digital applications. So the biggest, in terms of a communication opportunity, the biggest opportunity I think with the township right now is in the website. When we're talking about modernizing the brand or refreshing the brand, the website currently has an opportunity to follow that direction. So there's 2 levels to that. The first one is applying the brand, the visual approach that we've developed. The second approach is actually building out the website so it does function a little more efficiently with modern devices. So it just carries along that concept of a modern brand. Signage. So of course, when you're in the township, it is crucial that you know where you are. That's one of the biggest obstacles or the biggest challenges of this rebrand, was ensuring that people found an identity in the place, and a great way to have the identity in the place is to have signage, so that just very simply you can identify where you are, so you have that recall as you're driving through or as you're stopping in. Also identifying the different township-owned places. This new identity gives you the opportunity to unite all of those, so that you now have a united voice when you're showing off the different spaces that are run by the township. And then lastly, community engagement. So this is more of an earlier on when the brand launches at first, but what's really important is that we use this brand as a way not to say we have a new brand, but we can use the brand to start talking about the township in this new way. So the different attributes that we've developed, that's basically the roadmap for messaging when talking about the township. We want to talk about the balanced living, talk about the charm, talk about the spirit. That's essentially a building block for how we can properly speak to the township. And so the way that we engage the community is not by just showing the brand, but by using the brand to talk about the community and growing that spirit and that pride in the place. And then last one is tourism. So the one great thing that every place brand has is the opportunity to put themselves out there. This one is more of a wish list idea, but whenever anybody is talking about Puss Lynch in a tourism perspective, whether it's social media or whether it's through a partner or it's your own internal efforts, this brand basically sets you up to be a real player when talking about tourism and drawing attention to the place. And that is the brand.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Sorry, that's really loud. I just wanted to start out by saying how impressed that I am and how much consideration you've taken from so many different aspects in developing both the crest and the motto. I think that's really important for the residents, that their feedback is considered, and I think you've done that in multiple ways. So I first of all just wanted to say thank you. I'm very impressed by that. The crest itself, I think I think that it's good in that it is definitely a more modern take, but it's not so different that it's completely unrecognizable, and I think that will resonate a lot with the residents because, as you mentioned, I think a lot of them are quite attached to that crest. So I think in that sense it's very good. I think it's great that you considered cost-saving opportunities by being this made available to go on business cards and signage in just the one color, and still have impact. But that in itself will save money in the end. I was concerned that, you know, we would go through this whole exercise and then the residents would just say, we hate it, we don't, we just want it back the way it was before. So I was glad to see that you asked that question, and that 70, I think you said 71 or something like that, said that they would like to see it modernized. So that makes me feel a lot better about moving forward with this process. I really love the colors, and I really, really love all the individual, like how you broke out all the different design elements and all the different applications that can be used for. I think that allows for some really cool applications for sure. In regards to the motto, you said that there's a separate website that is sort of out there right now for the residents to provide feedback.
So pushlynchsurvey.ca has been, it's what we've been using.
Yeah.
And so right now on it, the survey on it right now is about the motto.
Yeah, okay.
Because of the transition of council. So a motto is a very a motto could change in 5 years. A motto could change in 3 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully the mark itself doesn't change for a few decades. So it's important that the motto represents where the township is going right now as essentially a call to action or a stamp of pride. And so we felt it was essential that the current council, whoever made that up, had some input in that motto direction. So right now that survey is still running. There's a few options up there, and we're just waiting for feedback on that. So
have you had a lot of...
That one we've had less feedback on. Yeah. I think people are just less, to be honest, people are less engaged with that as opposed to a symbol or something they can speak
Yeah.
to.
Do you think it's because, and I'm only saying this because for myself, several months ago, I went on the Puslinch survey when it was actually a survey asking questions about
Right.
your feelings on the township. And I actually saw the sign on the front door here thinking, oh, I've already done that. So that maybe people don't realize that it's an evolving survey.
It could be. So we are tracking analytics on it. And so the one thing about surveys is that we always receive maybe twice as many visits to the site as we get responses to, and that's maintained. So the traffic has dropped.
Yeah.
But I do think I would recommend that for the motto, it's for the official motto, it's actually treated sort of as a little separate exercise from the brand, because I think the brand can launch without that motto.
Yeah, okay.
Also, because one thing I didn't mention too is in the actual mark itself, we don't leave room for a motto. And the reason for that is because, one, from a practical standpoint, this is going to be so small in most cases that having a motto attached to it isn't a good idea. And the motto lives in sort of a different aspect when it comes to the brand communications. So I do think it's sort of something that can live separately from. And we're also not saying it shouldn't be progressing together. Where the new model came from was just in the fact that there was such a concern for the current one.
Okay. Just sort of my last question is, there's a lot of sort of application in there that relates to social media, tourism, and I know that, well, I don't know, but I would assume that that takes a significant amount of resources to
Right.
implement that, maintain it, like continually add content to that. Are you able to provide any kind of, I guess, how would that work? What would all be involved in that, and what would we need as a township to do that effectively?
So are you speaking about social media specifically?
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. So with social media, typically the way it's done today is there is usually a dedicated marketing person who does more things in social media, but they are involved in social media. In the rollout plan at the end there, we do mention that the township would need additional resources most likely to maintain that. So what it would involve in the usual case is somebody who's essentially in charge of it and monitoring it and using it to its full ability. The one opportunity you do have, though, is that if you do have partner brands like the county that could leverage this brand to communicate messages about the township. So say, for example, you want to use social media to bring attention to the fall fair or something specifically. This brand will give you the ability to provide them with the right artwork and messaging that they can then send out. So there are a few things in the rollout plan that would require additional resources, but they're not all essential. They're just sort of nice to haves.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
From a resources perspective, ideally you have one person, and they have sort of a mandate to focus on marketing in general, and social media is a component of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Spoulos.
Yes, a couple of questions. First of all, comment. Thank you very much for a very thoughtful review and taking the input from the residents on providing something that's going to rebrand us, so to speak, for the future. Questions. The color palette you have a series of 6 colors. Where do you see the applying all these different colors?
So in most cases, it would just be one of the colors. In other cases, it would be any time that you have the opportunity to introduce more colors. And so, for example, if there was an opportunity to do any sort of in-town street signage or any sort of promotional materials or anything that requires the I guess the interesting look that color can apply, that's when they're here for. It also gives you the ability to use a different color in different situations. So on the business cards, we've used the blue simply because it's looked at as a more conservative, trusted color. If you were to put out a promotion or a piece speaking about something that might have a little bit more fun, you could use the purple. The red is definitely able to draw attention. Where you'll probably use them the most, to be honest, is in PowerPoint on graphs and charts. You're going to need a series of colors. And so that's really what it's there for, is to have that suite. But any opportunity you have to be a little bit more creative, then they're there to be used. And that's also why it is a fairly restricted palette, just because it is, the intention isn't to be a super colorful brand. But whenever there's an opportunity to have some creativity, they're there to be used.
Okay, and the last question I have, the model, where did you anticipate or would you recommend using the model? In what instances?
The model?
Model.
Oh, the motto. Okay, so the motto would be used in cases that are typically right from the council or right from the township itself, because it's really a message from the township to the citizens. The motto is not, in this situation, we don't recommend the motto being a tourism call to action. Some places you'll see, big tourist places like British Columbia or a place like that, they'll have a tourism motto. They usually also have an internal township or city motto for themselves. But if you're not if you're not part of the community, you wouldn't know about it. So it would be used in communications from the township, and that's also why we think it's important that the council has a good say in what that is, so they can be true to what they're delivering.
So you would see that on the letterhead, for instance?
Possibly, yeah. So if there's a letterhead that goes out to, say you send out even minutes of a meeting like this, if there's a document that you put that on, that would be an appropriate place for the motto. Where I wouldn't put it though is right with the mark itself, because we want the ability for that template to remain the same, even if you were to remove or change the motto in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roth?
Yes, thank you. I'm really pleased with the public engagement you took into consideration for this, and you could do a million different ones and someone would still be upset with it, so
Yep.
I think you've done a good job, and I'm pleased with it. That's basically all I have at this time.
Thank you.
Councillor Balmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, welcome back.
Hello.
Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about colors. It's a strong suit. But I maybe talk about some numbers to start.
Yeah.
In your, by the numbers, you talk about 71% were in favor of updating it. Makes sense. But we talk about 1/3 weren't comfortable with the motto, but that means that 66% likely were. So if I were,
That's right.
You know, so that's why, is that maybe why I heard you say not necessarily changing the motto?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is what I'll say. I'll add to that. A third of people just immediately disagreed. A number of the ones who agreed said, it's nice. I don't know how true it is, but it's nice. So we didn't include them as the ones who disagreed with it because they didn't disagree with having it. So I guess the biggest takeaway is we did not walk away from the motto feeling super confident in its accurate portrayal of the community.
That makes good sense, because I do like a lot of the other suggested ones, but we have a report on our desk tonight, you know, shows that the average household income of the township is $179,000. Mm-hmm. So I can understand for some, the motto progressing together may not ring true. But at the same time, it does speak to, you know, all working together to succeed together. You know, so although the incomes may spread apart, we all see each other as progressing together. That's how I
Yeah, and so I'll add this too. Just speaking to the income levels, so that I think that directly correlates with the real estate situation
Yes.
in the township. And we mentioned this in the report, but and it has nothing to do with branding, really. But whenever we asked, I'm going to say 98% of people, when we asked them, "What do you tell us about the township? What are your feelings? You know, what is it really all about?" A lot, we couldn't ignore the conversations around real estate. Everyone talked about the big houses that were going up, the change in demographic. So real estate and just that demographic shift was the largest point of contention. So I think I would agree with your understanding of what the motto is meant to do, and I think that because it's so polarizing and that's so clear, that's what causes people to not necessarily agree with it, just because it's such a there's not really any mystique around progressing together. You're saying that we're all working together very clearly, and if you don't agree with that completely, then you'll just disagree.
Right.
So there's no subtlety to it.
Right. Thank you, that helps. I like the elements of the crest that you've kept there. I think that's great. And I can't imagine, you must have had some challenges there. I grew up on the Irish Creek, so I mean, that's the other part of the town, that's the west side of the township. You've got the Thistle for the Scottish and the Devon Bull for the English. You know, when I think about Aberfoyle used to be called Schattsville before it was changed to Aberfoyle. And there's the German church in Morriston, where a lot of the settlers were German. And these are so many elements.
Right.
And most recently, you know, at our Heritage Committee, we've talked about how can we honor our heritage as a municipality without stomping on, you know, First Nations people's heritage. Did you have any discussions around how to deal with those elements that were here before us, or were part of our settlers, such as the German community, but aren't necessarily weren't in the crest that you started with?
So for both of those, German and First Nations, did come up sometimes, very rarely. It came up by one or two people, brought up the necessity for it. There wasn't enough of an interest in doing that to warrant us doing it. If we did, it would be out of our own opinion on what the right direction would be. So it was just actually so the conversation around, and I think I mentioned it when I was running through this, of including those three symbols of the heritage. We were very curious to see how the community would respond, because we thought they'd be the most controversial. When the results came back, it was typical that those three would want to be remained, and there wasn't enough interest in adding additional ones for it. Yes,
I understand.
I think that's one of those conversations that will always be a conversation, but the interest was clear that those should remain.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's always it's like when you go to thank a group of people, the risk is you're going to miss one and
Right,
offend
right.
somebody. Just to the point of the architecture that's been added to the place in the castle. I said I wasn't going to talk about colors. I'll stick to that. But is it possible, from what I understand, the window in that dormer is triangular rather than Gothic? And I think most of the houses and the old churches, it's curved to a peak instead of triangle to a peak. And I know in most cases you won't be able to pick that out on a very small version of this.
So these do have a bit of a curve
Okay.
to a peak.
Okay, good.
Yep.
That's probably blowing up bigger than
Yeah, it could be.
looking at.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
super. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Loved the piece. I've lived here most of my life and didn't know what Puslinch meant.
Oh, right.
I always knew it came from, you know, that place in Scotland, but House by the
House by the pool.
Pool, that was brilliant. So I appreciate that bit of research. I love those. I had a question about, you talk about a microsite.
Yes. So,
I love that idea,
okay, yeah.
but I don't think there are any numbers attached to it.
So that's included in our project scope.
Oh.
Essentially, what that is putting this document out to the community is a dangerous way of releasing the brand, just because it's so formal. So the microsite is essentially, upon approval of this, what we want to do is put together a site that basically summarizes this with just the most compelling components, with, like I said before, not talking about look at the new brand, but using a little microsite just to talk about the great virtues and attributes of the township and using the brand to do it. So it's essentially a one-page. It'll have the logo, have some messaging, and keep it very, very simple, but just as a way for people to see the new brand in a way that we have some control over.
Okay, because that's not how I understood it. When I read it, it talked about where businesses could promote their events and
Sorry, you're talking
attractions.
about, okay, yes, that's a different part of it. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, there's two microsites. There's a little brand launch microsite.
Oh, okay.
That was a recommended one for
Communications.
communications, yeah. So that's the idea there, was to create a, essentially, because you have a brand now that is a tool for communication, that's one opportunity to incorporate the local businesses in a way that they can speak to what they do and connect themselves to the brand.
So it's interesting, you use the word businesses, and yet so many of our events that you mentioned as being attractive and quaint are run by our, community building, not-for-profit partners.
Right.
That's what they could be included in that.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Great. What else? Oh, the other piece that isn't a business is that we've got about 1,200 acres of publicly accessible, publicly owned land that attracts cyclists, off-road cyclists, horseback riders, and hikers. Is that the kind of thing we'd put on there too, that could, even though we don't own those aren't municipally owned, but they are within the township and people can use them at no charge. Is that the kind of thing we could put on that microsite?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, I mean, the way to think about it is this brand identity is an opportunity to communicate all the great things about the township. And if that's believed to be one of those things, then it should be a draw. There's a lot of possibilities with the website.
I do want to make sure
Yeah.
I realize that Puslinch Lake could be in there then, I guess, and
Yeah,
even our own facilities to people want to hold events could be there.
Yes. So like I think the website is your biggest opportunity for communication, and the reason that we're bringing that up now is just because with the new brand,
Yeah.
it's the right time, or it's a great opportunity to develop that, so that you don't run into the same situation you have right now, where there's two sort of approaches to the brand and to the website.
But that's outside the scope of the project.
That part is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all the hard work you put into this and the engagement of the community. So
Great. Thanks a lot.
So excellent job. As you know, I'm new to this process, and I think you've nailed it. Coming from the other side of the fence, I was a little skeptical when this process started. I consider myself old school. I'm 40 years old, but I've lived in the township my whole life, and I thought, why are we changing stuff?
Yeah.
And again, you've nailed it. I think you did a great job. Even the incorporation of this, the possibility of taking this to the students at Aberfoyle, and they can color the young, engagement at a young age and get them involved in their council and community. I think it's excellent. The only thing I was a little disappointed is there isn't any color in the logo, but we're rebranding, and it could be time. And
I think too, and so the thing with that people said that, and I think we should acknowledge that. Where that color is opportunity is in applications like the way that we showed the banners, bags like this. So there's ways to introduce color into the brand and not have to rely on it in the logo itself. So.
Well, I believe we have a revitalization program in place for Morrison, so possibly we could see these banners in where I live. So.
Great. Yeah.
But I think that would be fantastic. So, and the motto, I like it. I think you nailed it as well.
The one that's in the lead right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
But all right. So, if there's any more questions, thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Moved by Councillor Sapoulas, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that council receives a presentation by Obs and Mug Incorporated with respect to building a brand for the Township of Puslinch, and that council approve the new logo and branding for the Township of Puslinch as presented by Obs and Mug Inc. All in favor? Carried. We have a new logo. Okay, I would like to invite Mr. Buseman down as a delegate. How are you doing tonight?
Great, thank you, Mary Celia and council members. My name is Jeff Buseman. I'm representing Mr. Dowdy over with the Cane, so you know who Mr. Dowdy is. Mr. Dowdy, I've been working with him for quite a while on this project, and there's a zone change on your agenda for approval to be approved by council. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I'm not asking for a change of what's proposed. I just want to talk about some of the challenges we've had and something to bounce off of you. In summary, a severance has been approved for Mr. Dowdy, subject to a number of conditions. A number of those conditions surround the impact that this severance might have on Capital Paving, which is nearby. To ensure no negative impact on Capital Paving, these conditions were put in place, and one of the things that was completed was a sound study. The sound study came back with recommendations. It came back with 4 recommendations. two of those recommendations are going to be implemented in the zone change that's before you tonight. One of those recommendations is that the new house be set 305 meters away from the source of the sound. The other recommendation is that the building be a one-story building. That's probably giving us the biggest challenge, the one-story building. When the study was done, initially, it says, if a two-story dwelling is desired, careful design of the building envelope will be required to ensure the sound levels are met. Possible design changes to accommodate a two-story dwelling could include removing all second-story windows on the east and south face of the dwelling, or designing interior space such that the east and south facade windows are for non-noise sensitive spaces such as bathrooms or closets, or having only a portion of the building with 2 stories. So it's giving some ideas on how to make this a 2-story. The challenge is, how do you write that in a zoning bylaw? When we came to the council last meeting with the bylaw, it came to light that Mr. Dowdy has a purchaser who would really love to have a 2-story. So the task was to go back to planning staff to say, can you write this bylaw a little differently to help us out? They spent quite a bit of time on it, and I applaud their work because I haven't come up with a better solution because they've done well. They provided a small report, and that report included 3 options, A, B, and C. A and B they didn't recommend very much. C that they recommended, and I support the C. Now, so basically what it's saying is that go with the 1-story, and then in the event that somebody comes along and wants to make a 1.5-story, a 2-story dwelling, apply for a minor variance, and then at that the part of that minor variance will be that building plans be submitted to the township and also probably to the noise consultant to ensure that it meets the intent of this study. That seems like a reasonable approach. Now, to make things just a little more challenging, the prospective purchaser of this property had some preliminary house drawings done. They forwarded to me just late last week. I forwarded that off to the noise consultant, and it had a fairly significant windows on the south side at the 2nd story. And I said, can you approve that? He says, no, I can't. Not the way it is. Maybe if we did some design changes, maybe. I said, and then the idea came up with, well, what about noise-proof windows? And now it's starting to get complex because I'm not a noise consultant. We're not noise consultants in this room. But one thing that came out of it was the noise consultant told me that for him to really seriously consider these design options, he'd have to do something called a reclassification under the NPC, the Noise Pollution Control Regulations from Ministry of Environment, MOEE. I said, well, I don't know how that works. How does that work? And he says, well, townships or municipalities do that sometimes, and when they do it, they go through a process. I said, what's the process? And he didn't describe the whole process to me because he only just gave me his insight and said, well, one of the things that has to be done is that you would have to notify people in the area. You'd have to go through a process to get this Class 4 designation. And it means basically having a different standard. Now, I'm expressing this to you only from my conversations with the noise consultant and what I've learned. I could be wrong in exactly how this process works. I guess part of my bringing it up here is trying to find solutions for Mr. Dowdy because of the interest in selling this property, and what's a way to make some practical solution. People have many ideas, but we need to respect the process and the tools that the municipality has at hand. So in summary, I guess I'm asking you to approve the zoning bylaw as it stands and what you have in your packages tonight. But maybe I'm just asking for feedback on this idea of a reclassification. I know I informed Karen about it a little bit, but this could be all new to Karen as well. I don't know. Maybe she has insight. I don't know on this thing. So this is new to me, but I'm just looking for feedback. Is this a road that we go down to take a look at and consider for Mr. Dowdy this idea of a reclassification?
Okay, I'll open it up to to council here to ask you questions. Councillor Goyda.
Hi. Thank you for that. So I'm going to blame my newbie status a little
Absolutely.
bit on this question. What is the difference between a one-story and a two-story? Why does it make so much difference for noise between a one-story and a two-story?
That's not even a newbie question. That's a noise consultant specialty question. I don't know exactly why. I don't know the in-depthness of this report well to understand why at 2 stories, maybe the sound just projects up, maybe it's louder. I don't understand that, and I can't explain that. Really, it's going to be the noise consultant that can explain why, but we're just working with their recommendation to say a 1-story will work. If you want a 2-story, if you did it right, it will work as well. And so he gave some suggestions on how to make that 2-story work, but the drawings that I saw last week, they will not work because they have significant windows at the 2nd floor facing south.
Okay. The reason I ask about that is because I drove by there on Monday.
Sure.
And immediately beside it is maybe it's not a 2-story, but it's a 1.5-story. And I guess I don't understand why it's an issue on this property that's right beside it, but not the existing property. And maybe you can't answer that question, I don't know.
Yeah, and Mr. Dowdy has expressed to me many times the frustration. What about those houses there? What about these houses here? How come they haven't gone through it? This is the only severance that's had this strong or this significant challenge of dealing with capital pavings concerns. The other homes that have been built, the Reed's Heritage Lake project was also subject to the noise considerations, and things were done for that project, including distance from the noise source, as well as a berm built on Concession 7 Road. I don't know all the details on that, but there were things done in that development to reflect the importance of respecting the noise. The dwelling, if I'm thinking you're correct, what you're talking about is the house to the right of this vacant lot, is when you face it from the road. Of course, that was built probably in the 70s or 80s, where none of this was around.
If we were to approve it as it's written, and the applicant would then apply for a minor variance, what would be the likelihood of that being granted?
I think that if if RWDI, the author of the noise report, reviewed the house plans, and it was a 1.5-story or even a 2-story, and reviewed the house plans and said, yes, this meets the standards or what we had intended in this report, to me, I think that'd be very strong for approval.
And the reclassification that you're talking about, is that they would only have to do that if it's a 2-story? If a 1-story is being built, this
right, it would only be for a 2-story situation. 1-story, no, you wouldn't do it at all.
Okay. So by going through the minor variance route, the applicant would have to prepare architectural drawings, prepare a site plan, submit it to the noise consultant.
That be as well as the building department here.
So that could take multiple times for them to do that, to get a plan that works at significant time and expense. So I guess my question is the applicant happy with this recommendation?
Mr. Dowdy would love if you said, no, we'll approve a 2-story, he'd be the happiest man in this room. It's a good question. I mean, house plans would have to be done regardless. I think the author of the house plans has to have greater sensitivity to what's trying to be accomplished. I did speak with the author of this. He wasn't totally informed in all the restrictions. He thought it was just the east face, not the south face. So he went in the wrong direction. He didn't have the right information. I think who's ever drawing these things, if they have the right information, they should be going in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Sapoulis?
Yes, question. What did you mean by new classification? I'm trying to understand that terminology. what you're trying to accomplish.
That's something I've been trying to learn as well. And then under the NPC is the Noise Pollution Control, I'm not sure if it's statute or it's the Ministry of Environment guidelines, and it's referred to in this document. And there are different classifications, and I guess the noise consultant has informed me that it should go, if I want to, he says, if I want to consider these special windows and so forth, I need to have a class 4, which I understand means a slightly higher decibel rating that could be applied to. So let's say the minimum is 50 decibels, and I don't quote me on the right numbers, but say the minimum is normally 50 decibels, then he could go up slightly to 55 decibels. That's what the reclassification.
Okay, okay, I understand now, yeah. It's actually 55 to 60. I read that document.
What if, I don't know the numbers. Yep.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions of Guzman, but I will have of staff.
Councillor Rowe?
I have no questions other than if we go to this new rating that you want to do, is that not just going to hold us up longer?
It's,
It's been held up for a long time.
I know, and and part of it is balancing the situation that we have a prospective purchaser that would like a certain type of house.
That isn't really our
Absolutely.
Our concern.
Absolutely, it's not.
So I think we should go with the minor variance avenue and let the chips fall where they may. That's all I have.
Councillor Balmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, good to see you again. Yeah, when I think back of, I think you mentioned there was a place on this property where we could have had a severance that avoided a lot of these issues, or created a lot, and then the issues that came up with the heritage designation, which we sort of just let that slide to make sure we could get this one. I think staff have come up, as you pointed out, they've worked hard to come up with an excellent solution. I think Councillor Roth has said it quite succinctly, so I would support moving ahead and leave it to the minor variance to address the concerns, and hope for the next time someone draws up a set of drawings, they pay attention to the details. So, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you know where they measure the 300-meter setback from, or maybe that would be better asked of staff, Ms. Wellheim, for the setback from Capitol Union? No.
It's from where the, I don't know the exact, I can't
driveway, or
describe
is it
it.
the source
No, it's
of
where
the-
the noise is created. It's
Because
not from the property line of Capital Paving, it's from the machinery and the equipment where the noise is created from.
Because I went on Google Earth here, and I've been in Capital Paving. I used to work there, and they put up sea containers for noise reduction for the Reed's Heritage, I believe, and the berm. But also, I'm measuring the house in Reed's Heritage is 300 meters, and it's a 2-story from their driveway. And so you would be further from what I can tell on Google Earth here. So I would be in support of just, I think we're putting too much red tape on this. I would be more likely to approve just direct staff to approve a zoning bylaw to allow a 2-story house. It's already evident that they're there. There is some onus on future purchasers. You have to research where you're buying your house. I live by the 401. If you step out my front yard, it is very noisy. But that's just an aspect of living there. I have a wonderful view of the back. So I don't think we need to be having things in place to monitor this build. I'd rather just direct staff to, like I said, approve a 2-story home, because it's evident that they're already existing within the same 300 meters. And I don't even know if you could fit the same size house on your lot. But they're enormous houses. So that would be my... Councillor Sapoulis has some questions of staff.
Of staff, after we finish with this deputation.
So,
Yeah, when you start addressing the report, I'll have questions of staff.
okay. Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis, that council receives a presentation by Jeff Buseman, Ben Harton, with respect to zoning bylaw amendment application E14/DOU, David Doughty, 7129 Smith Road. All those in favor? Carried.
Okay, so now this is, you're just going to ask council if they're okay with bringing the report forward. This is here.
So we're just going to skip to this one section, bringing the report forward. So it's moved by Councillor Balmer, seconded by Councillor Roth. The council receives a report by the County of Wellington Planning and Development Department with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application, D14/DOU, David Doughty, 7129 Smith Road, and the council passes a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1985 on the subject lands as outlined in this report. All in favor? Oh, questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, questions?
I don't have any more.
Yeah, I have questions of staff. First of all, the county planner.
Fine.
First of all, can we not have a conditional bylaw? In other words, Clause A says you do what you say, that 1 story is permitted, and then if 2 stories considered, then you have to provide evidence that you meet the intent of NPC 300?
Well, we can't do conditional zoning like that. Because of the complexity of the noise report and that's in Michelle's report, she quoted from the noise study, and there are just too many variables for us to be able to handle that through the zoning, and that's why we weren't able to recommend that.
Okay, is a restrictive covenant another option to consider?
That wouldn't be a route that I would recommend, no. Yeah.
We proceed with option C. Would the application for a minor variance meet the 4 tests of a minor variance?
Well, I think that's a good question because obviously, we want the option to be successful if that's the route that they go. And rest assured, if there was an easier way we could do this, that we could support and recommend, we certainly would have, we tried. The minor variance approach is, it's a committee decision, so as you know, I can't anticipate how that process might play out in terms of the 4 tests, so we need to be looking at the meeting the intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw, desirability for the appropriate development of the property, and then whether it's minor or not. We wouldn't have included that as a suggested approach if we didn't feel that it was something that could be appropriately dealt with as a minor variance. Public health, safety, and welfare is one of those cornerstone issues of planning, and that's partly where this is coming from. But if, like Mr. Buseman had just said, if we had plans that were actually being considered, the building plans, the site plan, and that the noise consultant did a review of it and they were in agreement with the design, then I don't see why we would have an issue with it. But obviously I can't know for sure.
Okay, if we went ahead with strictly a 2-story, permitted 2-story, what would be the risk associated with that?
That's a good question too. I think just part of the burden and the responsibility that council has is to make sure that when you deal with planning applications that those MOEE guidelines are adhered to, and the applicant has provided the necessary study, and their own consultant has recommended these mitigation measures to not only protect capital paving, but to protect the landowner from any kind of a compatibility or hardship. I did want to mention, if I may, that this is a hot mix asphalt and a ready mix concrete plant. It's a Class 3 industry, meaning it's the largest with the most potential for impact, and that's why this is more involved than what we would normally see.
Okay, this NPC 300, where else is it being used in the township or the county?
Well, the NPC 300 environmental noise guideline was actually referenced in the noise study that was prepared for this property. the noise consultant has applied it to this property. So it's in effect, and that's a current guideline that needs to be applied. What they didn't do is advance this idea of reclassification to this Class 4. If they were going to do that, what would have been helpful for all of us is for that to have been in the noise report, so it could have been considered in a careful way, and so that we all understood what it meant. I did do some looking. I found some examples from the City of Toronto where they've done this Class 4 scenario, but you know, as Jeff has indicated, he doesn't have any experience with it. I'm not aware that it's ever. It hasn't happened in the township, and I'm not aware of it being applied in the county. So we just simply haven't been given enough time to be able to look at how that could be done. I'm not saying it might very well be a valid approach that could be used, but you know, here we are tonight. Yeah.
Okay, question of our CAO. Had this property been in existence for, say, 15, 20 years, what would be the process to get a building permit for a two-story on this property?
It would be the submission of the building permit application, and then it would be reviewed based on having, like any other building permit application.
Okay, so that's all the questions I have. I'll be making a motion to permit a two-story once you went around and...
Mr. Roof? Do you have anything? Any questions? So I have a couple
have
questions. Oh,
questions.
sorry, Councillor Bomer.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that we are, I think Ms. Wilhelm made an excellent point. We also have a responsibility to protect our industrial land user there. Capital Paving has expressed a concern, and we dealt with this with the Heritage Lake situation, and all those extra covenants were put in place, all those extra protections were put in place to address the concerns of Capital Paving, to ensure that a new resident would not be in a position to lodge a complaint and shut down that business. I think we have had our county staff do good work on coming up with a way forward on this that's reasonable, and it addresses the concerns that have been raised by Capital Paving. I think that's important in this, and it allows the landowner to proceed to build the house and sell it to someone who possibly wants to build a two-story with an appropriate process to do that, to ensure that our adjacent industrial use is protected. And I think, I don't want to lose sight of that, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood where you were going with this, but in order for this applicant to get the severance, they had to do the noise study. That was one of the conditions of doing the severance. The severance wouldn't have been granted if the noise study wasn't done. And I think we have to be careful here because, as Councillor Bomer said, we owe something to Capital Pavement. They were there first. They are a industrial class, and if we say, okay, you go ahead and build whatever you want, then this whole thing could be appealed by Capital Paving, and this lot will never get sold.
Yep.
Like, it will just tie it up. I think by going with the minor variance, everything's going to be done as proposed by the minor, sound study and the distance, and that was the conditions on getting this severance. And I have a difficult time to just say, well, go ahead and build a two-story and ignore the noise study and ignore the, you know, I don't feel comfortable with that.
Is there any other ramifications for ignoring, per se, the noise study? So we have this before us, we approve a two-story, and then the next time it comes forward, is that kind of like case law? It's setting precedent that you know, the noise study won't carry weight with future applications in a similar circumstance?
I think, in fairness, that would be a better question answered by a lawyer. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, well, that was my only question. Do we have a motion on the floor?
I'm going to move that we strike the current proposed zoning bylaw and permit a second story. I look at this, and certainly the noise consultants applied the latest standard, and I did troll through the internet and see where the standard was applied, and it applied basically to large developments and adjacent to very noisy roadways, very noisy sources of noise. And I look at this property in relationship to the other two homes that are there. There's a story and a half that's there about 50 meters away. There's a new house that was built perhaps another 100 meters away from this particular property. And I'm saying, you look at this and you juxtapose those two homes against this one, and you're saying, what's wrong with this picture? And you say to yourself, I don't understand what's going on here. You're fact that he's asked for a severance, had he asked for a severance 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We asked for, have a severance now, the current standards and everything apply, and whereas the other property on the other side, it was already there. I didn't have to do any noise bylaw, any noise studies to ensure that his home met the standard. So I'm going to move that we proceed, we amend the bylaw, whatever it is, BL 2018-70 to permit the construction of two-story dwelling, and that we ask the CEO, Ms. Wilhelm, to be allowed to leave the meeting in order to develop appropriate wording so the bylaw can be amended, approved at this meeting.
Do we have a seconder? I guess no second.
No second, Liz is, okay.
Okay, so, do I have to read it again?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to call all in favor of the motion on the floor,
Which is?
the council receives a report by the County of Wellington Planning and Development Department with respect to zoning bylaw amendment application D14/Doughty, David Doughty, 7129 Smith Road, and the council passes a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1985 on the subject lands as outlined in this report. But are we choosing which option?
Yeah. So if I may, and Sarah can always correct me if I'm wrong, if council supports what's in the report, what's on your agenda is the bylaw later on for a one-story, so then the applicant would have the right to apply for a minor variance.
That's correct.
Yep, and get the house.
All in favor? Carried. All right. Oh, this is yours, sorry. Okay, so we're going to move on to communications. Just try to get on the right page. First one is the notice of works replacement of the Puslinch Concession Road 7 bridge over Highway 401, detailed design and class environmental assessment, and correspondence from AECom dated November 28th, 2018. Any questions or comments? No. Okay, the next one is the 2018 municipal study, Wellington County, correspondence from BMA Management Consulting, Inc. That was a big one. Anybody have any questions or comments on that one?
Just have one comment. I look at this table all the time, which says property taxes as a percent of household income, and they say they're worth 3.4%. And we know we have some really rich and big homes here. If we take those out of the equation, I don't know what percent they represent of the total population, then we're going to be way up there. It's not going to be 3.4%. It's going to be considerably more. And I think this is something we should have a bone of contention with by using this particular data. And we had this at the familiarization last week as well, and I think it's skewed the wrong way. That's one of my comments.
Okay. Any other comments? Or Councillor Bulmer?
Sure, I got a few. It is interesting. You look at our socioeconomic numbers, and they are skewed up. As they're very high. We're near the top of the list in many categories for our socioeconomic standing. But when I look at if I look at the total asset consumption ratio, both in this report and from the FIR report that was in our last thing, we're at 65.7%. So while we're a very strong economically in terms of our socioeconomic numbers, this 65.7%, which the FIR suggests put us in the moderate risk range, if you look at us in the table of all the other comparators, we're third from worst, which really highlights the need for us to get on top of our asset, our deferred spending on our capital assets, which, and as you know, we're going to a public meeting on asset management in January, so I think it's important to underscore how the value that asset management program is going to bring to help us get on top of this. Because I think Mr. Creamer pointed out it was about a $9 million infrastructure deficit a few years ago, and I don't know exactly what it is today. I'd have to total up the numbers from our latest report. What's interesting, to Councillor Sapoulis' point, sometimes it's difficult to know how to read and interpret some of these numbers. We look pretty good on reserves as a percent of taxes. We're in really good shape on 102%. On reserves per capita, we're below average. But what's really interesting is when we look at the levy per capita, it's similar to what Councillor Sapoulis was talking about, the levy per house, percentage of household income. If you look at the levy per capita figure, it puts us at around $2,500, which is about $1,000 more than the average. But if you multiply out the numbers, that comes to 17 million, which means they're including the county portion of the levy in this figure, whereas the other figures in the report are based on just our lower tier numbers. This one obviously is including our upper tier component, which I understand may be fair, but again, to the point of being skewed by current value assessment, this is skewed up because the property values are so high here, and we're paying a proportionally higher amount of the county assessment because of those property values. So if the county taxes were assigned equally across the county, I'm sure this number would come down as well and perhaps be more in line with the other. So it wouldn't be correct to blame the Township of Puslinch solely on the difference in this number. There was one other that I'd like to better understand in the future, and maybe I'll talk to staff about it, is the general government number. It talks about $154 per capita, I think. And I'm not sure how to do a comparison. It's so hard to do a comparison with other municipalities on that, because it's understandable that would be higher than a larger municipality who has a higher population to spread the cost of general government over. But we're also higher than some smaller municipalities, but I don't know the size of their budget. So as interesting as these are, it always leaves me scratching my head as to, are we doing better or worse than others in some of these? And my very last one, which I think staff can answer, are development charges. Councillor Sapoulis has talked about this a fair bit about the residential rate has been the lowest. We were lowest in this report. Is this something that will be addressed by our update to the development charges bylaw, or is it because we just don't have the services to warrant higher development charges?
So the development charges bylaw takes into account the growth over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So all of that will be taken into account when we go through our development charges update in 2019.
Well, it may address it, may not close the gap completely, but it'll refresh it, I guess.
It will be updated based on most current information, right? Okay. So.
Super. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Ballmer. I had the same concerns with our development charges. I spoke with Mary through the week, I did notice some red flags in the report, but I also believe that asset management plan that Mary's been working diligently on is going to address some of those concerns. So we're going in the right direction.
Yeah,
so that's excellent. Okay, on to the next report, which is the Puslinch Miners Soccer Club Annual General Meeting on Thursday, January 10th, 2019. The correspondence from Bruce Joy, President dated December 4th, 2018. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor.
Just who's attending?
So I was initially reached out to by Bruce Joy, and then I had a quick conversation with Councillor Sapoulos. I felt that he was quite knowledgeable in this situation, and my recommendation was that as long as he accepted that, he maybe present to the Puslinch Soccer Club so that we have the facts straight with them, if you're willing to accept that, or...
Everybody else agrees, yeah.
Sure. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I think,
If anybody else wants to attend, I'm sure they'd welcome you.
I think someone for sure should, especially given the amount of donations that we're going to need for the soccer park. And so hopefully they can help.
And initially, I responded that I would go, and then I started analyzing it and thinking that I know John is an advocate for it, and he's quite knowledgeable, and I thought it would be useful for them to get the information straight.
Sure, no problem. I'll gladly go.
Okay, all right. And then the next one is the environmental fee increase notification letter, correspondence from CBM Aggregates dated December 11th, 2018. And any comments or questions on that? Councillor Bulmer.
Just in time for getting the new increased levy as well.
I know.
Are we, is it 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or is this only half a step back?
I have the same concern. I attended the Ontario Sandstone and Aggregate meeting in December, and they were saying that they want to do more, and help the township, and then I see this come through, so I'm a little disappointed. I'm not sure if I should reach out to them again and see if maybe we could have this reversed or not, but I was definitely disappointed to see this come down. Any other questions or comments? Okay, now we're going to go on to intergovernmental affairs. And so we had the cannabis meeting, what was that, Monday? Monday. There was approximately 30 people in attendance, maybe a little more. I thought it went very well. Any questions or comments on that from the other councillors? Okay. We have the promise to introduce private cannabis retail. Oh, that's all part of that, right? Legislation, retail legislation. Any questions or comments on that?
Which one is
the second one.
second one, no.
75-2 FWAMO policy update. That's the one we're looking at there. Just quickly back to the cannabis one. You had the survey completed. When will we see that?
So the next steps involve, there will be a report prepared for council for your January 9th meeting so that you can meet the January 22nd deadline date. That report will include, we'll have the minutes done from that public information meeting, and it will also include the results of those that chose to after the meeting to indicate whether they had a preference for opting in or opting out.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the letter to heads of council from Minister Clark. Any comments or questions?
I discussed this with our CAO, and I was asking her, are we going to participate in this? And she led me to a report which was prepared by the Association of Municipal Managers and Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. And I read the report, and some interesting facts in there. This was a recent report that said 79% of municipalities our size think it's too onerous, and it's too it takes too much staff time. So it's very refreshing to hear that this government is going to take it the opportunity to listen to us and try to relieve some of our burden.
I agree. Any other comments or questions? Okay, move on to the Roma Board of Directors call. Any comments or interest in serving on Roma?
It wouldn't apply to us because there is already a...
Is that out of our region?
We already have our Area 2 representative.
Okay. Okay, now we're on to the City of Guelph. Notice of complete application proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the, looks like a subdivision just off Victoria Road at McAllister. Any comments or questions?
Yes, I have a concern. This is going to be a big development. It's going to generate there's roughly 400 units going in there, maybe another 800 people or so type of thing. It's going to start putting more traffic on Victoria Road. When I was doing electioneering, I came across an enclave of residents on the east side of Victoria Road. And they're just north of the golf course, and they're sort of south of McAllister. And they have no way to get to a set of lights so they can cross the road, or likewise getting out into traffic in with all the traffic here. And this is just going to exacerbate the situation. So I'm wondering if we can ask our county planning staff to look at the traffic study that was done associated with this development to see if there's a justification for us to ask the city to put another set of traffic lights, perhaps just north of the golf course, to accommodate our residents on that side of the road.
As a crosswalk.
I don't care, crosswalk or a set of lights, something that allows people to get to the other side. If you're going, for instance, the kids, if they go to the school bus, I think the school bus stops on that side of the road, going southbound, not the northbound. And likewise, people trying to, residents trying to get into traffic to get a left turn out, it's very difficult. So my motion is to request the county staff to review the traffic study to see if there's anything that we can do to, whether the information is there to justify asking the city to put a set of traffic lights at that location.
I think the CEO would like to speak to that.
Perhaps I'm just looking at Sarah, so is it possible that we can word it that we work with county staff and, if necessary, any of our applicable consultants to review the issue that's being raised, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, I was thinking that your consulting engineer would be a good person to review that study too. Yes.
Okay, so we can work in conjunction. Okay.
I have just a quick question before that motion goes forward. For the Director of Public Works, do we have a maintenance agreement? Because that's a boundary road, correct?
No, it is not.
It's not a boundary road? So it's entirely the City of Guelph's responsibility? Okay, that's all I just had a question for. Okay, do we have a seconder for that, that motion? Do we need to read it out again? Or did you want to speak first?
No,
Comment? Any other comments before we get a seconder?
That she seconded it.
Okay, you second it. Comments? All in favor? Great. Okay. Now, moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis, that the intergovernmental affairs correspondence items listed on the council agenda for the December 19th, 2018 council meeting be received. All in favor? Carried. All right. So, do we have Puslinch Fire? Nothing from Puslinch Fire. We have Mary from Finance also. All right, here we go. So, moved by Councillor Sapoulis, seconded by Councillor Goyda. The council hereby authorize the applications for cancellation, reduction, or refund of taxes, Chapter 25, Section 357 or 358 of the Municipal Act 2001 as follows. Year 2018, application 0918, roll number 4-07100, write-off amount, 0. 2017, application number 10/17, roll number 3-23900, write-off amount, 0. All in favor? Carried. Okay. And where are we here? Oh, administrative department. Okay, so.
If I could speak to that, that would be great.
Sure. So moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis, that report ADM 2018-035 regarding term of council 2014 to 2018 goals and objectives updates be received. And
I just wanted to, just before council has any comments or questions on that particular report, I just wanted to point out that this report here is essentially here for the purpose of just closing off the end of the year. As council is aware, you'll have an opportunity to discuss the prioritization of the particular goals and objectives once we set a date early on in the new year for you to do that review.
Okay. Any comments or questions regarding the 2014-2018 goals and objectives? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right. right. And we have moved by Councillor Sepulveda, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that report ADM 2018-037 regarding community-based strategic plan 2015 to 2020 strategy scorecard update be received. Any comments or questions? No. All in favor? Carried. Next. Just gonna try to keep up there. Okay, moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sepulveda, that report ADM 2018-040 regarding the committee governance review be received, and that council approves the changes outlined in this report for the following committees: Heritage Committee, Planning and Development Committee, Recreation Committee, and that council directs staff to table a committee governance review report at the beginning of 2022 to 2026 term of Township Council. Comments and questions? Councillor Goyda.
Yes. I do have a question. There is a recommendation in this report for I think for all the committees, but this question is specifically about the Heritage Committee, about, it says staff recommends that the chair be the council member, but I guess my question would be, is a council member required to be on the Heritage Committee?
Does anybody want to answer?
I know. No. You want me to? Okay. The legislation doesn't require that you have a council member on the Heritage Committee. We've included a council member, though, in the current terms of reference to be on the committee.
Okay. And so my second thought, I guess, that sort of goes hand in hand with the recommendation of that the chair be a council member, stems from a word that came up, I think, either in the capital budget meeting or the council meeting before that, about succession planning. And I know that this term of council is just beginning, but 4 years from now, there could be circumstances that in our lives that maybe some or all of us aren't running for re-election. And I think our committees are comprised of members of the community who have an interest in community involvement. And I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, that being on a committee is perhaps a first step or a sort of a feeler for if someone may want to run for council in the future. And I worry that by restricting the chair to be only a council member, especially if we're saying that's going to be the case for the entire duration, that we are possibly discouraging growth from within in a roundabout way. And so I'm wondering if it may make sense to reword that a little bit to say maybe the council member is either the chair or the vice chair to allow for that opportunity, or maybe just to eliminate that altogether.
You want to comment on that?
I was going to go a little bit step further. My concern is succession planning too. 4 years from now, some of us may not be around, and you still may be around. And
why didn't you say that to me?
You're not on the committee. You're not on the committee. The comment I had is, if we say that the councillor is going to be on the committee for 4 years, if Councillor Goyda doesn't have an opportunity to go to a couple of committees, then she's going to be limited to exposure on one committee. So my suggestion would be is that we maybe go 2 years type of thing, or allow a second member, second council member on the committee, act as a vice chair or something like that, just to give that exposure for the councillor. I did not think about the comments that Councillor Goyda made, but that's very apropos. And in fact, I follow that step type of thing.
Yeah, it's your path, yeah.
So it makes sense. So I would support limiting 2 years to members of the public, as well as to the council, the chair of the committee. If somebody doesn't want to be there for nobody wants a committee for 4 years, well, that's fine. We'll find somebody to do it for 2 years.
Okay, so are you proposing that the member of council does not automatically become the chair, or?
I would think it depends on the committee. Something that's a little bit more complex, you probably would want, at least initially, until somebody got the ropes behind them, like a member of the public, perhaps. Like initially, I would think you'd want the council to be the chair, but once you got somebody in there, that's going to be.
So hence the 2 years, like review it after 2
Yeah,
years.
exactly,
and, you know, so should there be wording that the vice chair be someone from the public? Do we need that included in there? And then that would be the transition from vice chair to chair?
Well, I think that's already built in the way it's written, that there's only one council member and the rest are members of the public.
Okay, I'll just take some more comments. Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree, especially since we only have 3 committees of council and we've got 4 councillors. So it's kind of hard if a councillor is appointed to a committee for the term of council, that's going to leave one councillor that won't be on any committee of council, which is fine as long as it's me. Anyway, I have a tendency to agree, but I don't, is this the time to be discussing this?
Yeah. Yep. Adopt the recommendations from staff, so. Councillor Bomer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Councillor Goyda. I think it's good to build strength and sustainability through our committees. I was thinking of this from an organizational perspective as opposed to a political perspective, and I think it's always good to encourage people to get involved. And Councillor Sapoulis is an excellent example of how it can be a stepping stone to council through the chair. So I would support the idea of just, let's not designate that the council member has to be the chair. If the committee so chooses, I mean, I would prefer that they weren't chair, but absolutely vice chair would be perfect, so they'd have the skills to step in an instant. But I think because we have, most of our committees have, well, currently have, if even half of them reapply, we'll have some good members who could fill in the chair position right away. But I also like Councillor Sapoulis' suggestion regarding making council terms on these committees 2 years. So there's an opportunity to rotate through. And I guess I can't remember what the current appointments are for the members, because there used to be offset that there was a midterm appointment and an end-of-term appointment, so the whole committee didn't change all at once. So we had some continuity of experience on the committee. Madam Chair, CAO, can you refresh my memory on how it currently
Yeah, that was changed actually during the last report, so back in 2014.
It'd be complicated to go back to having 2-year terms or appointments, would it? Or
I think one of the reasons behind going to the 4-year term at that time had to do with just the time of when a new member comes on board and the time to get familiar with the mandate and the responsibilities of the committee, and then also when you're looking at if there is an interest, I guess, in terms that would fall in line with what has been raised, being a chair, or vice chair, or a chair that would provide that particular opportunity with that length of a term.
Then I would certainly support what I've heard then, the council members are not automatically chairs, and that council members are only appointed for 2 years to our committees. And in terms of that point of this report, in terms of the,
So is it automatically after 2 years they have to rotate to a new committee, or is it just if there's other interests that can be shuffled? Or is it you're expired after 2 years and you move on?
My sense would be is it's not mandatory. We
can have a discussion.
We have a discussion in 2 years' time, and we'll see who wants to fill which position.
it's healthy.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that as well. So do you need some new wording for your?
If it's okay, that I know I believe Jessica would like to be the mover of that. And how I'm going to word it is that I'll encompass both of them so that we'll shift it that it's a 2-year term for the members of council, and we will remove the wording with respect to a councillor member being required to be a chair.
Okay. Councillor Goda's comment about bringing in more people into it, can we not ask that we rotate out some of the members of the public so we get some more interest in this? You may have, after 2 years, somebody says, I don't want this anymore. And you may have somebody who's a keener out there who's saying, I really would like to get in here.
Are you talking about the length of term for the serving as chair?
No,
for
members
the
of the public coming in. Your report, I believe, says that they're appointed for 4 years.
Yes, and the reasoning, and I think that this, it's up to council, of course, but I would recommend keeping your 4-year appointment. And then with respect to the changes that you are making here, there's then opportunity for them to, perhaps they may or may not be comfortable taking on the role of a chair initially, but it gives them time to become familiar with the actual committee. And then there is the opportunity can be presented for them to take a chair and vice chair role.
Okay. Would a compromise be that it's 2 years, subject to them agreeing for a further 2 years? This is members of the public. In other words, if somebody wants to leave type of thing, I think it's embarrassing for them to say, I'm resigning type of thing, but at least this way it gives them a way out. After 2 years, you do not want to renew their interest in the committee, then so be it.
I'm going to, I believe that actually with some of the legislation, it actually indicates in the legislation itself, perhaps for our mandatory committees, that it is an appointment that's supposed to be for a term of council. If you could perhaps leave that thought with us, and as we move through the process of advertising for the committee appointments, we'll look into that component of it first. And if I can take the component and make sure that I understand it, that we're going to look at the fact that the council members will rotate at the 2-year mark, and not mandatory, optional, and that we remove the requirement that the chair is a council member. And then I just need a seconder.
We just need a seconder. Councillor Roth, all in favor? Carried.
I have some comments on the other pieces too.
Regarding the committee?
No, the other parts of the report besides the chair piece.
Okay, that would probably be a good time right now, if you'd like to.
Well, maybe other people do first. I'm not first on the list. So.
No, that was all I had.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Councillor Roth?
I'm fine.
Just a couple pieces regarding the Heritage Committee on the terms of reference. Some of the members were concerned about setting the time of meeting in the terms of reference. So would it be possible, as you've done with the naming the staff position, just make it the Monday? So if they choose to have an evening meeting, we don't have to change the terms of reference? Because right now I think it says meeting time 1 p.m. Is it possible just to leave it as the day of the week as opposed to time of the day?
Yeah, my understanding, Councillor Bowman, was that they wanted to change from the evening meeting from 7 p.m. to 1 p.m. So we certainly make that change. I'm sure that we can include appropriate wording, or as may be
Perfect.
amended from time to time. We'll put the appropriate wording in.
Thank you so much, because I didn't want to get stuck in that for 4 years. There was a concern about some difference in wording between the mandate of the committee and the deliverables. So there were two of the deliverables, two parts of the mandate that weren't mentioned in the deliverables, and that was to do with recommending properties for designation, which is part of their mandate but not listed as a deliverable, and creating the municipal registry, as you know, which is what they've been working on most the last year or so. They really want to get that thing wrapped up. So I think it's important that that be identified as a deliverable of the committee, that actually producing that municipal registry for council to adopt. I can't remember when the last time council adopted that list, but it's being updated. So if that was possible to those two.
Yes.
Yeah.
To Councillor Goyda's point earlier, the terms of reference currently show that it's 5 members of the public make up the thing. And I know we amended that in term as when I became a member of the Heritage Committee, but make sure we catch it here that it's 4 members of the public. Well, actually, right now, it's 3 members of the public, 1 member of the Puslinch chosen by the Puslinch Historical Society, and 1 member of council. I guess that's still a member of public, the person that's recommended by the Historical Society recommends to council to appoint. Is it possible to catch that? Thank you.
They're nodding yes, yep.
I have to put a little bell on the CAO so I can hear when she's nodding her head. On the PDAC, when I sat on the planning committee, there were some, and I sat on the committee of adjustment. One of the things that I thought, and I'm sure Councilor Zapoulis can add into this, is that sometimes you'd see applications coming through for severances or for developments or for minor variances that were telling you something about the direction we're going and whether they were in keeping with our vision is laid out in the official plan or how we thought the township was going to develop under the zoning bylaw. And sometimes we saw things that seemed to be taking us in a different direction. Or coming up so regularly, it'd be best to it's time to put a change to the zoning bylaws, especially minor variances. If you see something coming up all the time, maybe we've got a problem with the zoning bylaw, we need to fix the next housekeeping amendment. So I wondered if it was possible that sort of every 2 years, just have a thumbnail report from that committee as to some of the improvements, some of the patterns they're starting to see, and any opportunities for change in upcoming amendments to either the official plan when the county does one, or the zoning bylaw when we do one. Not a substantial, not an in-depth thing, but just keeping track of these changes that they're seeing, so that when we come to a housekeeping amendment, we've got the feedback of that committee, you know, sort of on record as we go, as opposed to trying to capture it from our memory all at the end. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Just a comment. Yeah, we've had issues like that come up at PDAC, and we asked the secretary to minute them and to bring them forward to the CAO. So they have been addressed as they
good.
go through. So we are very mindful of not spending the same time over and over on the same issue. So we've done that proactively, and as they've come up, we've mentioned it, and it had been covered off in the new zoning bylaw. So we see the same process happening again. If something comes up, it's going to be done proactively. We're not going to wait 2 years. We're just going to do it as it comes up, type of thing.
Okay, because I remember on the committee of adjustment, we'd see things when people were getting relief for a sign, the same thing over and over and over again. So we finally changed the sign bylaw to save everybody going for a minor variance or relief from the sign bylaw. Good, I'm glad that's happening. Recreation. I understand, I appreciate the recommendation to go to quarterly or every other month, whichever it was. But as we look to redevelop those PCC lands and Fox Run Park, I'm looking for direction from staff and other members of council on this one. Is there any way we can revision the rec committee, make use of them in those processes, and or revision them as a group that has representation from our user groups, say the people that have leases with their facilities or soccer or baseball, so that we get meaningful input and guidance on what they need from our facilities. And I don't have an answer for that. I couldn't square it with the current mandate. Didn't seem to fit that.
So your concern is that they're not going to meet frequently enough, and we're not going to get the feedback while we're developing the soccer fields, and is that kind of the direction you're going?
No, more question, is there a way we could use them in that? I didn't see that in the current mandate. Is there a way we could, I don't care how, if they meet fewer or less times, we're developing some recreational assets. Is there a way we can use the recreational committee, the rec committee, to help us with that process? We're going to be reaching out to the public for Fox Run. We're going to be reaching out to the public maybe with PCC lands. Is there a way we can use them in that process? I don't know the answer. I'm asking other people if they have a solution to that, because I'd like to see, if we can, make use of those people.
Certainly, I think we can make use of them. I think the example, perhaps, Councillor Bulmer, would be when we were going through the Recreation Parks Master Plan, they were involved, and they also attended, actually, at the market, if I recall, in terms of creating awareness with respect to that particular exercise. So certainly, as we move through looking at establishing, I'm going to call them open houses, for both of those processes, we're happy to bring it forward to the Recreation Committee and see what they would like to, in what capacity and how they could participate.
Okay, great. And is there any value in designating the membership to be representatives from our various user groups on that committee so that we have, a direct connection with them, whether it's people that are leasing a facility or using a sports field? For that kind of feedback and involvement?
Do you mean like similar to what we do with the Heritage Committee with representation from the Historical Society?
Yeah.
Is that what you're...
Yeah, that kind of thing.
What I would suggest in this particular case right now is perhaps maybe what we could do is when it comes time to advertise for these particular committees, we could circulate notice about the advertisement, and then let's see if we get interest from those groups in terms of making an application to be on the committee. Would that make...
Yeah,
okay.
That works too. So one last thing. On the PCN, it talks about, I know when we originally approved the PCN, it was to have no financial impact or whatever, and we're not talking substantial financial impact in the recommendation here, but it does talk about bringing some figures forward as through part of the budget process through operations. And just in light of what we've heard tonight about moving forward with microsites, and I think there's an interest in moving ahead with social media, can we just pause the decision on this until we put it in the context of moving ahead with our revisioned branding exercise and social media strategy? Can we put that in that basket?
Sure. What I would suggest, I guess for better lack of better words to say, we'll park it for now, that particular part, and as we go through the budget process. I
just want to clarify, because if we move to quarterly, the newsletter is produced monthly. So if we park this for now, do we park the production of the newsletter as well until we confirm how it is being produced? Because it is continued to be produced on a monthly basis, whereas the member is no longer a member of the committee until we confirm the new membership, right?
Right. Oh, that's a good point. Oh, is it possible, Mr. Chair, if I could ask another question of staff then? Absolutely. Is it possible we just follow this recommendation then until, we don't know, we haven't got to the process to fund this position yet?
Yes.
Right. That's my only concern. We haven't, and we have other projects coming up that may be of higher value for the staff time that goes into producing this. I feel like I'm dealing with in the wrong order, that's all.
Perhaps, and Nina makes a good point, perhaps why don't we understand, we'll let this move forward with the understanding that we're going to have this debate at budget time.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Roth?
Yeah, Councillor Bulmer made reference to the Heritage Committee recommending buildings to be designated. I didn't know we designated buildings.
Go.
No, we don't. We haven't designated any buildings. We have properties of interest which are listed on a heritage register.
Okay, so that's. I just never heard that word before. I know we plaque some buildings if the owners agree.
Well, if I could, Madam.
Designation is another whole.
Yes.
Councillor Bulmer?
If I just to clarify, it's not that there is a lineup of people wishing to have their buildings designated. It's just part of their mandate under the Act. So they wanted to have it listed as something that they would, if someone came forward and wanted to have it designated, the Heritage Committee would make that recommendation to Council if necessary. Not that there's one that's currently up for designation. And you're right, we typically don't designate them here because we haven't got the funding to back it up.
Is that a decision that's made by council as a whole, that we will agree to designate buildings? So what's the point of them recommending it unless council's made the decision that we're going to? Like, don't we have to have that discussion?
So the Heritage Committee would have to make a recommendation to council. I know that it has been, and I know other members of council with more history than myself can confirm that there hasn't been a designation process established within the Township of Puslinch. So the Township of Puslinch has elected to go by way of recognizing the property as significant through its plaquing program. And the Heritage Committee is actually working on a report to prepare for council in terms of an annual report, just to say what the committee has been working on. And if at that time they indicate that they would like to express or move forward with looking at designations of property, that will come up at that point. And yes, it would be council that would provide feedback to its committee on if that's how they would like to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question or comments on any of the committees? No? Okay. So I'm going to read this. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulis, that report ADM 2018-040 regarding the committee governance review be received, and the council approve the changes as amended outlined in this report for the following committees: Heritage Committee, Planning and Development Committee, Recreation Committee, and the council directs staff to table a committee governance review report at the beginning of the 2022 to 2026 term of Township Council. All in favor? Carried. Okay. There we go. Moved by Councillor Spoulis, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that report ADM 2018-041 regarding the mayor's absence schedule be received, and the council adopts the mayor's absence schedule as outlined in this report. Any questions or comments? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, this made me think of something that sort of builds on Councillor Goyda's talk about succession planning and building strength from inside. I understand from the previous report, one of the benefits of having members of council as chair of our committees is it gives them an opportunity to learn how to chair a meeting. And when I saw this report, it made me remember that we do have a rotation already for if the mayor isn't available for meetings. But I was wondering, would it be possible to build into this schedule that we automatically rotate chairing of public meetings? So each member of council has an opportunity to chair a public meeting to help build on that that skill set. Sort of following this schedule, but on the same schedule, if there's a public meeting, whether the mayor is available or not, then the councillor that's in that slot chairs a public meeting that month.
I am okay with sharing the workload. I don't know if we need a resolution or if we could just discuss that. I'm not a micromanager. I mean, if we want to rotate through according to this schedule, or even just make sure everybody has at least one chance per year, I'll leave it. I'll open up to Councillor Goyda. If you have any comments.
I would be okay either way.
I think it's important that the mayor chairs this meeting as available, but he's the face of council and he's the face to the public type of thing. You're the focal point. So I think that's important that it retains that way.
That's fair. Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in your job description.
All right, I'm fine with that.
You are the CEO of the township, so I think that is your duty. And I think as councillors, we attend enough meetings that if we have to chair a meeting, we'll struggle through it somehow. I don't think we have to chair a public meeting to get that experience.
Okay, so I don't think, were you going to propose a motion?
No, I just thought it as an opportunity to build depth of skills in the council members.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I signed up for this position and I should be the face of it, but I also, I mean, I encourage people that want to learn and expand their repertoire. We can maybe have some discussions later. The other thing I just want to point out with this on-call schedule is if I'm at work and there's an emergency, most likely I would be attending as a firefighter. So in the months, say if you're January, Councillor Bulmer, I would let you know what days I'm at work in case something were to happen, because you would probably be the primary contact for 24 hours. If a tornado blows through, so there's another little aspect there just to make sure you're aware that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, we'll just make sure there's somebody available if I'm at work for an emergency situation as a contact. Councillor Bulmer?
Well, just one note I had on this as well was that I don't believe this is for emergency management purposes, because we have a designated alternate for that purpose.
Okay, fair enough.
So it's, because we're not all trained at the same level that Councillor Roth is to step in as alternate for emergency management. He's served in that role, I think, now for 2 terms.
Too long.
So maybe we'll need someone. So
I can help you with that. Just for council's information, just while you're on this, I'm going to lose my voice. The Deputy Clerk, Nina, will be circulating expressions of interest soon with respect to council's interest in the respective committees. That also includes representation for the emergency management component, and that, as Councillor Bulmer has pointed out, that does typically involve additional training.
any other questions or comments on the council adopts the mayor's absence schedule? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Okay, so moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulos, that report ADM 2018-043 regarding the appointment of a closed meeting investigator be received, and the council passed a bylaw to appoint John Maddox as its closed meeting investigator for a 4-year term commencing December 1st, 2018. Any comments or questions? All right, all in favor? Carried. All right, these are going fast now. Moved by Councillor Spoulos, seconded by Councillor Goyda, the report ADM 2018-044 regarding the 2018 municipal election accessibility report be received. Any comments or questions?
No.
All right, all in favor? Carried.
I'll try to try that machine next time. Oops. Didn't try it out.
All right, so we're into the planning and building reports. Let me I want to make sure I pull that up. Moved by Councillor Roth, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, that report building 2018-005 with respect to the building department monthly update November 2018 be received for information. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. And moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, that council receives a report by the County of Wellington Planning and Development Department with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application D14/PIE, Pier Property Incorporated, 267 Brock Road South, and the council passed a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1985 on the subject lands as outlined in this report. Any comments or questions? No? All in favor? Carried. All right. Moved by Councillor Bulmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that report PD 2018-012 regarding the holding removal rezoning application Mini Lakes Residents Association Lot 9, 22 Jasper Heights PV, file number D14/MIN, part lot 21, concession 8, plan 61M203, formerly municipally known as 7541 Wellington Road 34, township be received, and that council authorize a request to remove the holding H1 provision from zoning bylaw 1985 as amended for lot 9, 22 Jasper Heights PV, formerly municipally known as 7541 Wellington Road 34, be approved, and the council directs staff to prepare the bylaw to authorize removal of the holding H1 provision. Any comments or questions?
No.
All in favor? Carried. Where? So notices of motion. What?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Oh, you know what?
Did we miss one?
Well, there's not.
No, we didn't miss any. Yep.
What about Dowdy?
We did that. We did that
did it
right
in
after the
order.
We just
presentation.
accepted the report. Okay.
Yep. It's just that this one,
Isn't it under bylaws?
You should have moved it.
Maybe.
No problem. Sure, I'll sign it. Jim. Ken can speak to it.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Sepula, seconded by Councillor Balmer. Whereas the current plans for the reconstruction of Brock Road through Aberfoyle retain the 4-lane cross-section, and whereas it is highly desirable to revitalize Aberfoyle into a pedestrian-friendly hamlet with commercial and retail enterprises once the Morrison bypass has been completed, therefore be resolved that Council for the Township of Puslan requests that the County of Wellington prepares a report reconfiguring the 4-lane cross-section to an alternative layout such as 2 lanes of traffic with parking in order to create a pedestrian-friendly environment, which would encourage the revitalization of Aberfoyle and which could be implemented once the Morrison bypass is in place. Any comments or questions? Councillor Goyda?
I think it's a great resolution.
I just want to speak to it. We can push for it now. This is going to a 2-lane concept, but I don't think we'll get any credibility or any traction on it. My suggestion is we be ready for it as soon as the Morrison bypass is in, and we have the planning staff at the county prepare the necessary documentation and say this, and get our buy-in and what we think we would like to see, and perhaps take it out to the public and be ready for it when that event does happen. Like, we're going to get pushback, and some people are going to say you can't do it. Well, if you go to Waterdown, they've done it. Dundas Avenue goes in and out of Waterdown. It's a 2-lane road through there with a center turn lane and parking on the one side. So they've done it on the busy street as Dundas. It's got a lot more volume, I would think, than on a daily basis than we have down 34 once the Morrison bypass goes in. So my recommendation also makes use of the pavement that's going down there now. It's a 4-lane cross-section. So if we go to 2 traffic lanes plus park on each side, or as Councillor Bulmer suggested, an alternative would be is 1 lane of parking, 2 lanes driving, and 1 center lane. That's there too, but that's something that we can have the planning staff look at. The only suggestion I have to add to the motion is that we send it to the county. I think it will be done automatically, but also to the city of Guelph, so they know that we have this on planning horizon.
Okay. Councillor Roth?
So you're suggesting we do this now?
We ask for the planning report to be done now, so that when the Morrison bypass goes through, we implement this.
But it wouldn't come into effect until or if the bypass goes through?
Correct.
Because I believe this is the busiest road in the county.
I agree with you, and I said, and that's my opening comment, is we could try asking for it now, but we won't get any traction because of lack of credibility. At that time, once the Morrison bypass goes in, we seize that opportunity to do this.
Yeah, I think we might be a little early in our request, but you know what, it doesn't really matter. They're either going to...
Well, I think if we put a stamp on this, that we want this, and start petitioning for it, sooner than later, we'll get better feedback.
Okay. Councillor Balmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might offend somebody over here, but that's okay. I think Councillor Sepoulis is right on the mark here, and I don't think it's ever too early to ask. I think there's an interest to see Aberfoyle become a walkable hamlet in the future, and I understand Highway 6 has the potential to change, the Highway 6 bypass has the potential to change this traffic through Aberfoyle, but I also understand from the county's perspective it could change nothing, because the amount of development that's happening proposed to happen up at Maltby and Clare, and our hope then is that the Highway 6 bypass will be there, and the new Cloverleaf will be there at Maltby and the Hanlon, and hopefully it'll be faster for them to go there than to come through Aberfoyle. So that's why I think it doesn't hurt to ask to do this now, because the concern, if we wait too long and they plan for 4 lanes, then they're going to build 2-lane roundabouts. And it's the 2-lane roundabouts that have a lot of concern for people. When I talk to people who drive through Cambridge, and they see how often the two-lane roundabouts are jammed there because a car has gone beside a transport truck and gets pinned between the middle and the truck, which essentially closes or plugs the roundabout, which isn't a big deal in Cambridge. You only have to go, it's a small block to go around. Emergency vehicles can get around a plugged roundabout. I can't imagine what would happen if the roundabout at Gilmore became plugged and our emergency services got down there. It's a long way to go around to turn around and come all the way back and around again. So if we ask for and plan for what Councillor Sepoulis is suggesting, 2 lanes and parking, or what some people were suggesting that night, 3 lanes with a refuge, 2 lanes with a refuge lane in the middle and bike paths on the side, it's all the same width, it's all the same footprint, so really it comes down to changing where we paint the lines. But the timing matters because it will drive the size of the roundabouts. And so that's why I think it's right to ask now, so that if it has any merit, we get single-lane roundabouts rather than 2-lane roundabouts. I think an important point to remember is that the environmental assessment for the widening of Brock Road was completed prior to the environmental assessment of the Highway 6 bypass being completed. So it didn't even consider the potential impact of the Highway 6 bypass or the impact of having the new interchange up on Maltby and Highway 6. So I think I'd like to add in there that point that the EA that said we needed 4 lanes predates the environmental assessment being completed for the Highway 6 and predates the Highway 6 bypass being put in the 5-year plan for the province. So thank you very much. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bomer. This is a question for the road superintendent. Do we have control over the truck traffic through Aberfoyle? I am in agreement with Councillor Sepoulis about revitalizing and turning it back into a hamlet. I'm well aware that north of Clare Road, Gordon Street, they restrict heavy truck traffic. It's not allowed after 7 p.m. And this is something I would, as part of your revitalization, I would like to see the restriction of truck traffic through Aberfoyle. Do we have the jurisdiction for that?
No, we don't. That would have to come from the county.
So from the county, would you be okay with me adding that we look into maybe restricting truck traffic as well as part of this plan? Question them about it and see if we.
I consider that as a friendly amendment. I just ask the CEO that would make sense to piggyback that on top of this.
So that'd be my concern, but I agree. I think asking early is imperative. I believe, I don't know, maybe Ms. Wellheim would be able to comment, but I think they're going to tender for the reconstruction very shortly. So as Councillor Balmer mentioned, we're not going to be able to change it down to 2 lanes, so the size will stay the same, but we can repaint the roads and.
Exactly. Yeah, my comment is after its end, and if I may comment on the roundabout. I understand where Council Bomer's coming from, having 1 lane, but I don't think we'll get any buy-in on that.
No, I understand that.
But at least once we go down to 1 lane each direction, we can argue at that point that the roundabouts can come down to 1 lane, and perhaps we can amend the motion here to say, including consideration for the roundabouts to a single lane.
Yeah, I support that.
Okay. Do you need any clarification on wording, Madame CEO?
I'm going to actually just check with Nina as well. So if I may, one component of it, Councillor Bomer, has to do with noting that the environmental assessment for this project predated doing the environmental assessment for
completion,
bypass.
That's right.
Okay, and then the second part, if let me know if this is appropriate wording, and to also request the county about the feasibility of prohibiting truck traffic on Brock Road.
That would be sufficient for me.
Entirely prohibited, or just hours?
Evenings,
including time of prohibition. Say, what do you think?
In the city of Guelph, 7 p.m. And my school of thought is thinking when people are home from work and they're trying to enjoy their dinners and they don't need to be listening to all the truck traffic drive by their houses, especially with the provincial highway up there.
Is there a time frame that I should look? But 7 p.m. to what is it typically?
In the city, it's 7 a.m. I believe.
Okay, so just to inquire about the feasibility of prohibiting truck traffic between 7 PM and 7 AM?
Are you looking
Weekdays?
for that now or after? After, at that time?
When this goes forward.
Okay, so,
Okay.
yeah, okay, good.
And then I did hear right now, I think it was Councillor Bulmer, with respect to requesting the county to comment on the feasibility of a single lane roundabout.
The intent would be is at that time as well. In other words, including the converting the 2-lane to a single lane.
So at that time. So it's
Correct.
all tied to the completion of the Morrison
Correct.
bypass.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay.
then I've got it.
She's got it, so do you want me to read the whole
No,
motion again?
No, no, you're
You guys are
fine.
good, so all in favor? Okay, so we have a time-sensitive bylaw amendment that we're going to address right now. It's moved by Councillor Sepula, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that council allows the introduction of bylaw 073-218, being a bylaw to amend the appointments of all building officials and the chief building official for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch due to its time-sensitive nature. Any questions or? Oh.
Can I
CAO
just,
would like to-
I'll just speak to it. Thank you, Council. The reason this is being introduced at this time is that we, first of all, just need to update the listing as it relates to the employees that RSM utilizes just for the services that he provides to the township. And we just want to ensure that our bylaws are adequate in terms of ensuring that those members are appointed for enforcement provisions.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right, and the next one. Moved by Councillor Bulmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw to amend bylaw number 1985 as amended, being the zoning bylaw of the Township of Puslinch to remove the holding symbol for Lot 9 of the Mini Lakes Residents Association Condominium 22 Jasper. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 1985 as amended, being the zoning bylaw of the Township of Puslinch part of lots 24 and 25, concession 2 D14/DOU. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 1985 as amended, being the zoning bylaw of the Township of Puslinch part of lots 26 and 27, concession 7 D14/PIE. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 1985 as amended, being the zoning bylaw of the Township of Puslinch part, lot 5, concession Gore, D14-ODE. A bylaw to amend the appointments of all building officials and the chief building official for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Okay, so where are they? Is there any municipal announcements from any members of council? Councilor Goyda?
No, I guess the only thing I would like to say is this is the last council meeting before the holidays, so I would just like to wish everybody a happy and healthy holiday and hope you all get some well-deserved rest.
I concur.
No, I don't have any municipal announcements, no.
Councilor Roth?
I'd just like to be a little politically incorrect and wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Going to sing Rudolph too?
Councilor Bulmer?
Thank you. Yeah, I had an opportunity. Just want to highlight the Badna Community Center Association. They're our group of local volunteers that now operate the Badna Community Center. There was a concert last Thursday night. They had Fred Eaglesmith in. It was really something to pull into the Badna Community Center and see a tour bus parked there beside it and go inside. It was packed. It was great. Live music. Well, good turnout from the community. So it was a lot of fun. Good for them.
I don't have any other than I appreciate council's patience with their new mayor, and everybody have a great holiday season. And, I look forward to the next 4 years, I guess. Okay. Anything else? Councilor Roth is giggling at me.
No, I never giggled. I just smiled.
Never giggle.
Moved by Councilor Roth, seconded by Councilor Bulmer, that the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 074-218 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 19th day of December 2018. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth. The council here adjourns at, it looks like 9:19. Let me just write that down. All in favor? Carried.